Alright, so this game in a nutshell. Basically, it starts by blasting you with the typical anime intro, as if you were gonna forget that you're playing an animated game. And then once it gets done blasting you with all the flashy images and the super loud music, then you pick your character and finally start the game after like 10 minutes. And you're this highness with a bodyguard, servant, friend zone, third wheel, not really sure what he is. But you look up at the sky and you're like, oh my goodness, that's so beautiful. I can't believe it, like you haven't been there your whole life and been looking at that same sky every day of the kingdom you roll over. Then she looks up at the sky and she's like, oh my goodness, a shooting star, that's so cool. But with her supervision, she's like, wait a minute, is that a shooting star? That's a spacecraft, even though they don't know what spacecrafts are because they live in a medieval world where technology doesn't exist. And she's like, man, we gotta go see that. And he's like, wait, that's dangerous, don't just run off. And she's like, nah, I'm adventurous, I'm definitely gonna run over and see what this alien spacecraft is. And then finally they get there and they're like, oh my goodness, you were right, it is a spacecraft. And she's like, I know, I told you so. I wonder who's inside. He's like, don't go over there. I mean, it could be anyone inside. And then it opens up and we're like, oh my gosh, who is that? And then out steps a really sexy anime man. She's like, oh, that's great. That's exactly what I wanted it to be. And we need to trust him implicitly. And he's like, no, I'm your lover. You don't just trust random strange men and don't go over there. It's still too dangerous. And then they look over and they see this frog monster. That's not really a monster, just kind of a frog sitting there chilling. And they're like, oh my gosh, it's so dangerous, it's gonna attack him. We better kill that frog first, preemptively. And then so that's what they do. They all triple team and team up on this frog. And they try to give the guy a weapon, but he sits there and hesitates for like 30 minutes. Like, oh, should I pick up this weapon? And she's like, oh, it's okay, pick it up, it's yours. And it really was the black-haired guy's weapon, but she just kind of gave it to him without consent. And he's like, okay, I'm gonna use this against this frog. And I'm gonna do it. And then once they're done murdering the frog in cold blood, they get to know each other and they're like, who are you? Where do you come from? I don't trust you. And he's like, hey man, I'm not trying to move in on your girl. You need to chill out. And he's like, nah, I ain't about all that. I know better than that. I've been here longer than you, boy. And she's like, chill, dude. We're just friends. And he's like, anyway, yeah, so... And then this guy's phone rings and it just gets answered without anyone touching it somehow. And they're like, oh my goodness, what the heck is that? Where is this voice coming from? And then the guy on the voice is like, wait a minute, you're not my brother's voice, you're a girl's voice. And he's like, you know what, if you did anything to my brother, I'm gonna blow up your entire planet. And they're like, and the guy just sits there and doesn't say anything. He doesn't say, hey, no, bro, like, I'm here, I'm okay. He just kind of sits there and lets it happen. And they're like, no, please don't destroy our planet. And then he just hangs up. And then they go, so why are you here? And he's like, well, I'm actually looking for my girlfriend. And she goes, wait a minute, you're in a relationship? And he's like, oh, about that. And she's like, wait, we'll figure that out later. We can actually help you go look. We know the area. And he's like, okay, I mean, I don't really know the land anyway, so that makes sense. And then after like 30 minutes of game time, you finally reach the spacecraft. And he's like, oh my gosh, please be in there. Even though the computer told him there's no passenger signals like 3 times already, but yet he still opens it and realizes, oh, there's nobody in there, it's just his trash can. And the princess is like, yes, I still have a chance, even though homeboy's over here having a mental breakdown that his girlfriend is like dead. And he pulls out this trash can and he's like, I don't even know what this is. And then like during his grief that lasts all but 2 minutes, the trash can falls off the pod and magically hits the open button, in which it opens and releases this robot alien sphere thing, which the princess immediately takes a liking to because it's not a threat to her crush in relationship with this new guy. And she's like, oh my goodness, you're so shy, but I want to be your friend because you know my boyfriend, I mean this guy that I just met. And then they get ambushed by these village people that are just protecting the ruin that they kind of invaded on their way to get to this pod. So once they're done slaughtering all the village people, the robot still doesn't talk because, I mean, it's a robot. And she's like, well, I mean, you couldn't make it out here on your own, so you should probably come back to our village inn and we'll have a meal and we'll sleep together. I mean, sleep in the same room just to save money and all that. And he's like, I mean, that sounds good. I mean, I don't really know where to get food here anyway. And she's like, great, it's settled then and we'll get to know each other better. And he's like, okay. And the dark-haired guy's like, I don't like this. I don't trust this guy and I really want my sword back. But he's like, I mean, I need to keep it to survive out here. And she's like, yeah, it's yours now anyway. I gave it to you, even though it wasn't mine to give. And then after like a 30-minute trek back to the pod where he just came from, he's like, oh, now's a good time for me to actually call my brother and tell him not to destroy your planet. So he's like, hey bro, I hope you didn't ready that Death Star yet. And he's like, oh man, I wish you'd have told me that earlier. And he's like, well, what's done is done. So with the remaining time, they decide to go make use of that inn. And they're like, wait a minute, you want to hide that robot? And they're like, nah, because there's like these conveniently orb-shaped things that fly around people's heads that look just like it, so you probably don't need to hide it. And he's like, oh, okay, that's convenient. And Blondie's like, okay, let's get to it. Let's do what we came here for. And she's like, wait a minute, Black Hair, you still here? And he's like, yeah, I don't trust you guys alone, and so I'm not going to leave you. And they're like, okay, we'll just have this date with you here in the background. So they're getting to know each other, and he's like, yeah, I came from space, actually. I'm like a space merchant who like travels to different planets delivering goods, and I crash here. And she's like, accepts it unconditionally. And the black hair guy's like, nah, I don't believe that. You expect me to believe that you came from the sky and the space and stuff? And you think I haven't heard that pickup line before? And he's like, nah, it's actually true though. I did. I don't have any proof, but I did. Trust me, bro. Then once the guy finally falls asleep, she gets up and follows the blonde guy out. And she's like, alright, this is my chance. Our time to be alone, better make my move. Then they meet up outside for some intimate private action. And she's like, I have a confession to make. And he's like, no need. I see the way you look at me. And she's like, I'm a princess and you're a stranger and we have rules. And he's like, yeah, I visited many planets. I know all the rules and I know which rules are meant to be broken. And then she goes, well, I know I came at you pretty hard and gave you some heavy signals, but now that I know that you're into me, I'm going to pull back a little bit and have you do some of the chasing because you actually need to wait for me. And he's like, wait for what? And she's like, well, we hardly know each other. And he's like, well, let's rectify that. And when we do, let's seal the deal. It'll be our little midnight promise. And she's like, okay, that sounds good. So they go back to bed, and the next morning they all wake up together. And the black-haired guy's like, wow, I slept great. How'd you guys sleep? And they're like, yeah, we slept great. And he's like, oh, okay, good. I was worried. I'm glad you all slept okay. And they're like, okay, so anyway, let's go ahead and get moving. We don't have much time before the Death Star blows us up. And then she has this, like, internal monologue about how long she can keep this up because she really likes both of them, and the blonde guy meets her physical needs, but the black hair guy meets her emotional needs, so she kind of needs both of them to meet all of her needs. But they'll have to spend the rest of the game trying to figure that out, and with that, the adventure begins. And that's the end of the summary. If you guys like this, make sure you subscribe and watch more of my videos. Take care.